Hey guys, how's it going? So today, or rather last night, Avengers: Infinity War premiered, and I imagine that all of the reviews are just amazing. And I'm trying to hide myself from all the spoilers because I haven't got to go see it yet. I'm going to be going on Sunday with my girlfriend and some of her colleagues from work to see it. We kind of go see films in this like little entourage, and it's beside the point. But anyway, for the last, I would say 3, maybe 4 weeks, Rebecca and I have been like binging all of the Marvel films, trying to put a few things into place and just, jog our memories, catch up on everything that we might have missed, see if there's any like Easter eggs or little spoilers or hints that we missed for the upcoming films. And so, after having watched all 18 films, and it's also amazing to think that there's 18 films in this franchise and that they're still turning out films that, aren't awful. It blows my mind. It's amazing to think that they started with Iron Man 10 years ago, and here we are, 10 years later, coming out with a 19th film in a franchise, and it still has this huge following. But anyway, like I said, I've been watching all of the films, and I decided to put together a list of the best films. And when I was putting this together, it took me a long time to like figure out which one I liked the most. I definitely had an idea of which one I liked the least, and so over the past week, I put together the list, all 18 films, from worst to best. And then I asked all of my friends to see what they thought, because I'm sure that I don't think like my friends, and my friends don't all think like me. So we've been discussing for the past couple of days, and I think we have finally put together a list of what we consider to be Marvel's films, from worst to best. So, like I said, there were 18 films, and the way we have it broken down is the bottom 6, the middle 6, and the best 6, or the top 6. And so I'm going to go through them 6 at a time, and I'm going to discuss a few of them in each category. That way you guys can kind of understand where we're coming from. Now, I'm not going to discuss every film, or we would be here all night, and I could go on or all day, rather, and I could go on for ages. But I'm going to talk about, obviously, the worst, the best, what we think, and then a few things in between. So, starting with number 18, we have The Incredible Hulk. Number 17 is Iron Man 2. Number 16 is Thor: The Dark World. Number 15 is Iron Man 2. Number 14 is Avengers: Age of Ultron. And number 13 is Thor. Now, the reason we have The Incredible Hulk at the top of the worst list, or I guess as the worst film, we have several reasons, actually. The first being that the entire plot of this film kind of has no point for the rest of the MCU. The opening like credit scene kind of has like an origin story for Bruce Banner, and then you see him, in Central America hiding out, and then he's on the run, and then he makes his way back to America to where, he was studying the super soldier serum before he became the Hulk, and he meets Betty, and then he's trying to find a cure, so he meets this other guy, and then we have the introduction of the Abomination and of another villain called the Leader, and you also have Thaddeus Roth, who's leading the military and has help from S.H.I.E.L.D. and Tony Stark and all of these other people. And then at the end of the film, that's it. One, they changed actors. Two, the entire plot just seems to be kind of overshadowed and forgotten about. For the rest of the franchise, there's been 14 films. I think this was the third or fourth film, installment in this franchise. The next 14 films, you hardly ever mention, or it's never mentioned, rather, the Abomination, the Leader, Thaddeus Ross's daughter, Betty. Ross obviously makes a comeback later on in the franchise in Civil War. He is now, a high-ranking government official, and he's trying to kind of take control of, the supers. But otherwise, the film is just pointless, and it doesn't really fit into anything else in the rest of the cinematic universe. The only part that it kind of leads towards anything is the, how at the end, Edward Norton, who would later be replaced, and I support that replacement. He opens his eyes and they're green, and you can see that he's starting to learn how to control his rage. So there's that. Otherwise, really not a whole lot to the film. Now we also have 2 Thors and 2 Iron Men. The reason we put the Iron Man films in the bottom has to do with how they kind of treat Tony Stark's character and how they treat Iron Man after the first Iron Man film. So, starting with Iron Man 2, Tony Stark is this, again, a drunken playboy billionaire philanthropist who just doesn't seem to get the point. Like, in the first Iron Man film, he seems to have this entire, like, change in morality where he goes from being this awful person to being a savior of people. And then you get Iron Man 2 and he's just right back there. So it seems like Iron Man 2 just kind of stepped over top of Iron Man 1 to do this thing. And another reason we put this up here is because of like the lack of dynamicness or the just the one-dimensionality of the villain. And you really don't get a lot from this villain. He just seems to be this person who has a vendetta against Stark, and it's not highly explained in the film. Ivan Vanko doesn't like Stark, not so much for the fact that he is Tony Stark, but for the fact that he has the Stark name. Ivan's father worked with Howard Stark to create the arc reactor technology, and then was shipped back to Russia because he was thought to be a spy. And Howard Stark took all of the credit for the arc reactor. So Ivan's father would later die in Russia without being known for having helped create this thing. And Ivan is mad. And so that's the entire motivating factor behind Ivan, which isn't something that, like I said, is highly talked about in the film. And then, he just starts helping Hammer, and then, Hammer drones, and then everyone has Iron Man suits. And that's the premise of Iron Man 3. There's all these suits. Tony doesn't even need to be in a suit, to be Iron Man anymore. And so it just kind of takes away the whole premise of Iron Man. And that's the reason we put these here. We also have Thor: The Dark World. And not that I dislike this film, but my friends critiqued it heavily. And after we talked about it, I definitely understand why they put it further in the list than I had originally. But with Thor, you get a little bit of backstory about, Asgard and like some of the history of the universe, and obviously one of the Infinity Stones, which is hiding in the Aether. This is the Reality Stone. And so, other than that, there's really not a whole lot of plot or plot development in Thor 2. Now, the next one of the other films we have on this list is Avengers: Age of Ultron. Personally, this is one of my least favorite films. I had this much higher on the list, but my friends, and I, after talking, moved it down a little bit, but it's still in our bottom 6. And I have a lot of critiques for this film, and if I talked about this film, I could be here for the next hour telling you guys how much I dislike this film. But I'm only going to touch on a few things. One, again, the one-dimensionality of a villain. Ultron is accidentally created by, Stark and Bruce Banner, and reads through the internet, and then decides that he doesn't like the Avengers, and decides to destroy all of humanity. Yeah, that is literally the plot of this entire film. If you guys haven't watched it, and you want to know the plot, that's it. Right there. That is it. Oh, and then you also get the introduction of the Scarlet Witch, who has magic fingers, and has been scientifically experimented on, and has a brother who runs fast. Yeah, that is it, guys. Now, okay, so maybe that's not it, but they do set up a few things. One, they give us a little bit of backstory about Black Widow, which I appreciate. They give us, Hawkeye's family life and show him as being just a simple human, which is very relatable. They give a slight nod to Wakanda and Ulysses Claw, which that's a good point. And Is there anything else I can say good about this film? I mean, it sets up Civil War, which I have closer to the top of this list. Otherwise, that's it. Now, moving on to the middle of the list. Now, the middle 6 films aren't films that we dislike. They just aren't films that we thought were top 6 material. And I like all of the films on this list. We just had to, put them somewhere, obviously. So, starting at number 12, we have Doctor Strange. Number 11 is Guardians Volume 2. 10 is Captain America, the First Avenger. 9 is Ant-Man. 8 is Thor Ragnarok. And 7 is Captain America, Civil War. Now, like I said, all of the films that we have in the middle 6 we think are good films. And we like the way that they portray, each character or the thing that's going on during the film and how they relate to the MCU. They're just not top 6 material. Now, starting with Doctor Strange, we put Doctor Strange closer to the bottom 6 for a couple of reasons. One is the timeline progression of this film. He travels to this place so that he can learn the ways of the mystic arts and get the use of his hands back. And it just seems like, in a matter of moments, he just magically becomes good at magic. And I don't know if you guys have seen Harry Potter, but it took Harry Potter like 7 years to be good at magic, and he still sucks at magic, and he killed the Dark Lord. That's all I'm going to say. But, sorry guys. But it seems like it progresses overnight. And then they set up all these rules for things that he can't do. And then he's like, no, I'm going to do them, Don't read these books. Reads those books. Don't play with the Eye of Agamotto and, mess with time. Oh, I'm going to mess with time. And then he just magically is able to defeat, Dormammu, the villain, who seems just kind of like a throwaway villain at this point. And he's one of Doctor Strange's, biggest villains. I mean, he's one of the biggest villains that Doctor Strange ever faces. He just seems like a throwaway character in a film. We also put Guardians Volume 2 on this list. Not because it wasn't a good film, but because, one, it didn't follow the hype of Guardians Volume 1. Guardians Volume 1 is probably one of my all-time favorite films across any genre, and it's definitely in our top 6. We also have some of the funnier films in this franchise on the list, and that would be Ant-Man and Thor Ragnarok. Now, we have Ant-Man here because while we like the film, it was hard for us to see Ant-Man as a superhero film. To us, it was more of like a spy/heist film where he had superpowers. Now, there's a lot of good points around Ant-Man, setting up how the original Ant-Man was part of S.H.I.E.L.D. and showing how S.H.I.E.L.D. became corrupt. And there's just a lot of possible flaws that I see with the film, how when he shrinks down, he still has all of his strength and, all of his heaviness, but he can shrink something down and put it in his pocket and it's super lightweight. I just think that the film itself left a lot of plot holes and a lot of gaps that could be filled in, and that's why it's here. Now, we also put Thor Ragnarok on the list, and Thor Ragnarok, by all means, is the best Thor film. It changed my entire perspective of Thor. This is really the film where you get to see Thor in his prime. He's no longer the arrogant, cocky god, who's all-powerful. He loses his weapon, he has to fight his friends, and he has to see the destruction of his home. But he finally comes to terms with, being Odin's son and being the king of Asgard and what it means to be a ruler. And I think that is the best part of Thor Ragnarok, And then last but not least, in this section, we have Civil War. Now, we also have Captain America, First Avenger. Great film, middle of the pack. Not going to say anything good about it. I'm not going to say anything bad about it. It's just in the middle of the pack. Now, going back to Civil War. As I said, Age of Ultron kind of set us up for Civil War. And I look at this less as a Captain America film and more of an Avengers versus Avengers film. Uh, and I think it's very well done. You know, we're introduced to, you know, T'Challa. Well, first his father T'Chaka, who was the original Black Panther, not the original, but, you know, Black Panther before him, and then you get T'Challa. You also have, you know, Cap trying to come to terms with, you know, what's happened to his friend, and then, you know, trying to be a person for good. And, you know, in Age of Ultron, he says, you know, anytime you try to prevent a war from happening, innocent people always get killed, or, you know, and that's pretty much the premise of Civil War. You know, Tony is now on that side of people who wants to prevent these types of things from happening, where people get hurt because, you know, the Avengers are trying to save the world, or there's a mission that's critical. They want to make sure that's happening, but at the same time, Cap is reserved because he, you know, he's seen everything that's happened with, you know, Hydra infiltrating S.H.I.E.L.D. and people in government being corrupt, and he doesn't want them to have too much power. And so they clash. And then they also clash because, you know, Cap's best friend Bucky has been brainwashed by Hydra into being this hyper killing force. And it's, I have to admit, it almost made the top 6. This is just a really well done film, and it really sets us up for what's coming next. Now, moving into the top 6. At 6, we have Marvel's The Avengers. Number 5 is Spider-Man Homecoming. Number 4 is Guardians Volume 1. Number 3 is Captain America Winter Soldier. Number 2 is Iron Man. And number 1, Wakanda Forever, Black Panther. Again, I'm not going to touch on all of these, but I'm going to start with a few. Avengers we have in the top 6 for several reasons. One, it was the first film that brought all of them together and put all of the plots from all of the different films together and gave us a concentric story. It wasn't just, you know, this, you know, Iron Man film or the Hulk or Thor. It was one whole piece, and it helped us build a world around all of these stories to put together. And the way that it did it was amazing. I was a sophomore in high school when this film came out, and I saw it in theaters opening weekend, and I saw it in theaters another 3 times. It was that good. I've never seen a movie in theaters maybe more than twice, except for the last Harry Potter film, which I saw 3 times. Mostly for the feels. But it built the world so well. And without that Avengers film, we wouldn't have everything that came after it. And that's why it's in the top 6. We also have Spider-Man Homecoming, and this is personally my favorite Spider-Man film. I never disliked the Tobey Maguire Spider-Man films, except for Spider-Man 3. I think that was trash. They should have stopped at 2. And not that I don't like Andrew Garfield or his portrayal of Spider-Man, I just didn't like the story that was, in that film, or those 2 films. But with Spider-Man Homecoming, we finally have a Spider-Man who, is this geeky, nerdy guy who becomes a superhero and sucks at it and continues to suck at it. He doesn't just magically become a superhero and is good at it. And I think that the way that they built this film is that you have this guy who, like I said, becomes a superhero and sucks at it and has to learn. And he doesn't become popular or doesn't just magically get better at school. He has this trouble juggling life and, his personal life and his superhero life. And he's one of the most relatable superheroes aside from Hawkeye, And I think that they couldn't have done a better Spider-Man film if they tried. And then next we have, at number 4, Guardians Volume 1. Now, when Guardians came out, it was a very different film. It wasn't your typical superhero, like sappy, sad backstory and then character building and then climactic finish where the hero defeats his arch enemy and then gets the girl. This was something that was funny and had lots of action and was just a thrill the entire film. And it didn't lend to any of the typical superhero cliches. It was something completely new, even for Marvel. And I think that it set itself up to be one of the best films in the Marvel Cinematic Universe, if not one of the best superhero films ever made. And thus, it's in our top 6. Now, number 3, we have Captain America: Winter Soldier. Now, there was a little bit of debate among the group as to where to put this. We had it closer to like 5 or 6, and after a little bit of talking, we decided to move it towards the number 3 spot. And the reason we have it here is because of how well it works inside the cinematic universe. You have a Captain America story, and then you have the introduction of a new villain, and then you also have like the overarching theme of Hydra, who is a main villain against S.H.I.E.L.D. And the way that they portrayed this whole thing, you see the setup coming, but at the same time, it's very organic. And it's not, again, you know, like I said with Guardians, it's not your typical like hero versus villain, hero prevailing, villain, you know, losing. This kind of blurred the line between what was good and what was bad. And you know, Captain America's character has been working with S.H.I.E.L.D. doing all of these missions and everything. And, you know, S.H.I.E.L.D. has been building all of these things for, like, counterterrorism and how to prevent crimes before they happen. And you see this, how the line can be blurred. And I think that's the thing to take away from this film. And that's what makes it so well, you know, or such a good film, is that how well they portray this blurred line of what really is good and what really is evil. And this, again, leads itself into Civil War, which is another really good film. And number 2, we have Iron Man. And we wouldn't have the MCU if it weren't for Iron Man. Iron Man was the first, you know, film in this franchise series, and like I said, without it, we wouldn't have it. But just because it was the first one doesn't necessarily mean it was good. This one, however, is amazing. You know, you have the introduction of this new world where anything is possible. You have this guy who builds weapons, and you know, he gets abducted and he's injured, and then he builds a suit out of scraps, gets himself to freedom, goes back home, changes his entire perspective on life, fights against, you know, this guy who's been his mentor his entire life, and then admits to the world that he is a superhero and decides to fight for good. He's not always right, but it shows that it's just, it was such a good film. I can tell you that I saw this in theaters when I was like 13, and I loved it. And if I had to watch any film in this entire list right now, probably would pick Iron Man far and away. But that's only because my number 1 choice, Black Panther, is now on DVD yet. Comes out on May 15th, if I'm not mistaken. I've already pre-ordered it. All I gotta do is go pick it up when it comes in. But the reason that Black Panther is number 1 on this list, it again isn't like any of the other Black Panther films. Any other superhero films, especially not any films on this list. It's similar to Guardians of the Galaxy in the way that it doesn't just, you know, tragic backstory, superhero setup, good versus bad, good triumphs, bad, you know, loses, get the girl, whatever. You know, it opens up with this scene, you know, set in Oakland, and it's a misdirect. You definitely think that, you know, T'Challa, or that there's going to be something there, and there is, but you don't expect, you know, Eric Killmonger's little kid self to become the villain. And I think that's what's so good about this film, is that it's not something that you see coming. You know, they set us up in the film to think that M'Baku was going to be the bad guy, you know, or at least someone from this clan that is an outsider to the 3 clans that are living in Wakanda. And they're not. And then you also have, you know, Ulysses Claw, who you think is going to be a main villain, and then he's not. It's this kid who just wanted to be part of this society, and so he's going to tear it down because of what happened to his father. Just, Alright guys, so if you've made it this far, obviously you have seen me rant, or listened to me rant rather, for the last 25 or so minutes about the best and the worst of the Marvel films. And if you stuck around this long, thank you guys so much. I fully expect to do a review for the film coming up probably next Monday or so. Like I said, I'm going to be going to see it on Sunday. And hopefully, if that goes well, I'll be doing more reviews on the channel as well. But that's it for today, guys. If you enjoyed this, make sure you like the video, subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. But what I'd really like to know is what you guys think are the best and the worst films. And if you think I'm 100% correct, or if you think I'm full of shit, tell me in the comments below. I love discussion, and I would like to know what you guys think. Also, one last thing before I go. I still do have the... pardon me, guys. I still do have the giveaway going on this channel. And if you guys haven't entered that yet, all you got to do is click up here in the cards and enter. It's super simple. Just follow the link to the video. Make sure you like that video, comment on the video, and you could win a really cool Emerald City Comic Con pop. But that's it for today, guys. So thanks for watching.